Hi everyone, this is Eagle News. I'm Rose Papa Angeles in Washington. It's the first Saturday of the month, April 6, 2024, here in the nation's capital. The week's recap begins with the sending home of the bodies of 7 humanitarian and aid workers killed in an Israeli attack in Gaza, a strike that angered leaders of nations across the globe. The remains of the World Central Kitchen, or WCK International staff, were loaded into an ambulance, brought to the Rafah crossing, then to Egypt. There, they were collected by representatives of their respective countries. The 7 U.S.-based food charity workers died in an attack by Israel earlier this week. Israeli Armed Forces Chief Herzi Halevi says the incident is a big mistake. Halevi apologized for what he calls an unintentional attack on the WCK workers. In related news, world powers including the United States, France, and Britain led international criticism of Israel's deadly strike that killed the 7 World Central Kitchen staff working in Gaza. The aid workers were unloading desperately needed aid brought by sea to the war-torn territory. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu says the strike unintentionally killed the workers. Rosal Feria reports.
World Central Kitchen is one of the only 2 NGOs spearheading efforts to deliver aid by boat. It says a targeted Israeli strike on Monday killed Australian, British, Palestinian, Polish, and U.S.-Canadian staff. U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken urges a swift, impartial investigation into the airstrike. Blinken says Israel needs to do more to protect innocent civilians.
We shouldn't have a situation where people who are simply trying to help their fellow human beings are themselves at grave risk. We've spoken directly to the Israeli government about this particular incident. We've urged a swift, a thorough, and impartial investigation to understand exactly what happened. And as we have throughout this conflict, we've impressed upon the Israelis the absolute imperative of doing more to protect innocent civilian lives, be they Palestinian children, women, and men, or be they aid workers, as well as to get more humanitarian assistance to more people more effectively.
Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu says the strike was unintentional.
לצערנו ביממה האחרונה היה מקרה טרגי של פגיעה לא מכוונת של כוחותינו באנשים חפים מפשע ברצועת עזה. זה קורה במלחמה, אנחנו בודקים את זה עד תום, עומדים בקשר עם הממשלות ונעשה הכל כדי שהדבר הזה לא יישנה שוב.
The Israeli army vows to hold an investigation and promises to share findings transparently. French Foreign Minister Stéphane Séjourné says protecting humanitarian workers is a moral and legal imperative that everyone must adhere to. Séjourné says nothing justifies such a tragedy.
Nous avons, cher Anthony, évidemment évoqué le Proche-Orient. Permettez-moi d'abord d'exprimer notre condamnation ferme à la frappe israélienne qui a conduit à la mort de 7 humanitaires de l'ONG World Central Kitchen. La protection du personnel humanitaire est un impératif moral et juridique auquel tout le monde doit se tenir.
U.S. National Security Council spokesperson Adrian Watson writes on X that Washington, Israel's main ally, is heartbroken and deeply troubled by the strike. British Foreign Secretary David Cameron says the country had called on Israel to immediately investigate and provide a full, transparent explanation of what happened. UK Prime Minister Rishi Sunak says he is shocked and saddened after learning that a Briton was among those killed.
We're urgently working to confirm all the details, but my thoughts right now with their friends and family. They're doing fantastic work bringing alleviation to the suffering that many are experiencing in Gaza. They should be praised and commended for what they're doing. They need to be allowed to do that work unhindered, and it's incumbent on Israel to make sure that they can do that, and we're asking Israel to investigate what happened urgently, because clearly there are questions that need to be answered.
Australian Prime Minister Anthony Albanese slams what he calls a completely unacceptable attack and calls it a tragedy that should never have occurred. spokesman for UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres says the deaths of the 7 staff members highlights a disregard for the safety of aid workers in the Israel-Hamas war.
Turning to Gaza and the heartbreaking news from Deir al-Balah, yesterday I can tell you that the Secretary General extends his condolences to the staff of the World Central Kitchen following the killing of its staff members in Gaza who were on a humanitarian mission. The multiplicity of such events is the inevitable result of the way this war is currently being conducted. We reaffirm yet again the need for an immediate humanitarian ceasefire.
Rosel Feria, Washington, D.C. Eagle News. We live in extraordinary times.
In their first telephone conversation since the deadly attack to the humanitarian workers in Gaza, President Joe Biden tells Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu that an immediate ceasefire is needed. U.S. National Security Council spokesman John Kirby says Biden asked Netanyahu to make an announcement to implement detailed and concrete steps to protect civilian lives in Gaza, relieve humanitarian suffering of people affected by the war, and the security of aid workers there.
He made clear the need for Israel to announce and to implement a series of specific, concrete, and measurable steps to address civilian harm, humanitarian suffering, and the safety of aid workers. He made clear that U.S. policy with respect to Gaza will be determined by our assessment of Israel's immediate action on these steps. He underscored that an immediate ceasefire is essential to stabilize and improve the humanitarian situation and to protect innocent civilians.
Biden says the death of the WCK staff and the worsening condition in the Palestinian territory are unacceptable. Meanwhile, in Haiti, scores of people are fleeing Port-au-Prince within just 3 weeks amid an explosion of gang violence shaking the Haitian capital. Thomas I. Likeness with this update.
Gunshots constantly ring out. Bodies on the streets. Onlookers staring at the remains of the victims. This is daily life in the capital of Haiti. The statistics of gang horrors are staggering. From the beginning of the year to the middle of March, more than 1,500 people have died at the hands of gangs. There is rampant sexual violence, the recruitment and abuse of children, both boys and girls, and they're unable to leave the ranks of the gang for fear of retaliation. And those who have no gang affiliation live with the results of these crimes. This is Tanya Supri. She's 16. She says a couple of mornings ago she found her father dead, one of 4 people slain. She says he had not been involved with anyone. This man, who did not want to give his name, says he lives in fear. He says if he's driving around at night and comes across a police car, they will likely shoot at him. And the latest assault on the capital in this past week, gangs looted the country's national library. The library's director says the history of Haiti, which is the second oldest republic in the Western Hemisphere, is being threatened. Rare documents are at risk of being damaged or destroyed. Of the people who have fled Port-au-Prince, most went to southern provinces, but those regions don't have the resources to cope with this massive influx of displaced people. Haiti has been rocked by a surge of violence since February. That's when its powerful criminal gangs began their violent campaign to oust Prime Minister Ariel Henry. The fighting has sparked a severe humanitarian crisis. There are food shortages and a near collapse of healthcare infrastructure. An international arms embargo has proven to be useless. Weapons and ammunition continue to flow through the country's porous border. Although Henry announced last month he would step down to make way for a so-called transitional council, the gang violence continues, and the council has yet to be formed. There's disagreement among the political parties and others about how they will proceed. And while the violence and political wrangling goes on, the people you see here on the screen fall deeper into poverty and desperation. Thomas I. Likeness, Eagle News. We live in extraordinary times.
Back here at home in our neighbor state, Maryland, as the recovery and rebuilding of the Francis Scott Key Bridge is underway, here are some key information from the state on how the port is operating. Jeff Sanidad has the details.
Destruction and demolition crews work on cleanup operations of the Francis Scott Key Bridge. Authorities hope that removing the bridge will help rescuers recover all the victims' bodies as well as reopen the crucial shipping lane. The plan, cutting the giant crossing into smaller sections and lifting them out. Here are some information about local traffic adjustments. The I-695 outer loop remains closed at Maryland 173 and the inner loop is still closed at Maryland 157 Peninsula Expressway. Alternate routes for harbor crossings will be I-95 or I-895 tunnels. Vehicles transporting hazardous materials prohibited in tunnels should use the western section of I-695 around the tunnels. This includes vehicles carrying bottled propane gas in excess of 10 pounds per container with a maximum of 10 containers, bulk gasoline, explosive, and significant amounts of radioactive materials. The Port of Baltimore is still open for truck transactions. Vessel or waterway traffic into and out of the Port of Baltimore is still suspended until further notice. A tugboat pushing a fuel barge is the first vessel to sail through a temporary channel opened beside the bridge. 2 small temporary channels are being opened for ships helping clean up the accident site. On March 26, 2024, at approximately 1:30 a.m., the Dolly cargo vessel leaving the Port of Baltimore struck the Francis Scott Key Bridge, causing its collapse. 8 construction workers fell into the Patapsco River. 2 were rescued alive, 6 did not make it. 2 of the 6 bodies were recovered days later. The other 4 bodies remained to be recovered. Jeff Sanidad, Silver Spring, Maryland, Eagle News. We live in extraordinary times.
In other news, our team in Nevada speaks with a real estate agent after the controversial commission settlement with Realtors that could change the home buying and selling game. Anna Kui has that story on this week's Mind Your Business.
While the recent landmark settlement of the National Association of Realtors is shaking up the industry, real estate agents are gearing up to show the value of good representation, especially for homebuyers. The $418 million agreement comes after years of litigation with a group of home sellers. The National Association of Realtors decided to settle, eliminating the long-standing rules on commissions. That is, sellers having to pay for their own agents and the buyer's agent's fees, typically 5 to 6% of the home sale price. The settlement is still pending court approval, but if approved starting mid-July, one of the new rules will prohibit agents' commission to be posted on the multiple listing service portal. We spoke with Jamie Santos, a local Las Vegas realtor, on what this change could mean.
I think it would help in a way because I've seen some people steering some people in a place to live because they pay more over here. So it might help mitigate that. But I also think it'll be a little bit harder for the sellers to kind of incentivize the buyer's agents to come and show the house.
Currently, a written agreement between a buyer's broker and the home buyer is not required in most of the 50 states, including Nevada. But that's also a new rule to come once the change takes effect.
I do think this is going to be one of the things that kind of weeds out the agents that don't really know what they're doing. We have to build that connection so that they feel comfortable signing the contract. And kind of like a guarantee, like, okay, if you sign this contract, then I will do all of these things for you. And if you don't feel like I'm doing that for you, then let's come together and talk about a way to get out of this so that we're both doing what we need to do and you're still protected.
And protection for the buyer comes at an added cost, now that the sellers will no longer be required to pay for both their agents and the buyer's agent's commission.
With how high the prices are and how high the rates are, people are already complaining about how much they have to pay. That's why I do think a lot of buyers will probably look into doing it themselves. But there's some benefits of using a buyer's agent is definitely the negotiation process. Even though here in Nevada, we're one of the only ones that allow dual agency, so the same broker to represent both. It doesn't necessarily mean that even if they're representing you, if they're the listing agent, they still have more of an interest to sell the property. So they'll kind of just tell you what needs to happen to get the deal closed versus what needs to happen to get you in the best position. So having that buyer's agent, they also just know the process in general. So for example, some people don't realize that when you buy a house with solar, you may have to also qualify for the loan of the solar. You have to transfer the solar. So if you don't have an agent that knows how to do that, you're figuring that out yourself.
According to Jamie, real estate agents have always been able to negotiate their fees, but if the rule changes come through, home buyers and sellers can negotiate for even lower agent commissions and could bring about new compensation models. It could be a flat fee, or buyers can choose to pay only for the services they want. In any case, buyers are hoping less commission could mean a drop in home prices.
I don't think so. I don't think the prices will go down just because it's really about the inventory. So if no one is buying, maybe the sellers will offer more incentives that way. But as far as making the prices go down, I mean, for a dramatic price decrease, I don't think so.
While many people speculate on how these changes will transform the real estate industry here in the U.S., economists predict that the end of the 6% commission rate could cut the $100 billion U.S. consumers pay out in agent fees by 30%. In Las Vegas and Akui, Eagle News, we live in extraordinary times.
Let's head over to Papua New Guinea as a landslide due to floods kills 14. Prime Minister James Marape urges to the local government to help relieve and restore the devastated community. Eko Hortaleza Quinola on Oceania at a glance.
Prime Minister James Marape calls for a quick response to help the people and restore infrastructure services after a landslide and floodings hit the province of Simbu. Marape expresses his heartfelt sorrow for the more than 100,000 people of Simbu and East Sepik. Floods and landslides affect the districts of Gumine, Karamoy-Sol Nomane, and Kundiawa Gembor. 14 people have been buried alive in mud and debris. A little girl was rescued and taken to the hospital. Marape orders the Simbu government to use their funds to restore bridges, roads, and for purchasing medicine. He allocates 100 million kina for the initial mobilization work budget. Eko Hortaleza Quinola, Port Moresby, Papua New Guinea. Eagle News, we live in extraordinary times.
Extraordinary stories from Thomas Likeness today. From a small plate critter restaurant in London, to the battle against rodents in New York City, to a clock enthusiast in Germany. Here's Correspondent at Large.
And now news and commentary from around the globe. Are you an adventurous eater? Do you like to dine on unusual foods? Well, this might be the place for you. It's located in London, England, and the main ingredient of everything on the menu is insects. Leo Taylor is the co-founder of the Yum Bug Company. He says it's the world's first bug-based small plate restaurant.
Everything from the butter to the desserts contains insects, and obviously all the meat ingredients are crickets.
Taylor says they opened their doors in February. And he says their mission is to change people's perceptions about eating insects. So what kind of things do the chefs whip up?
We've got Mexican dishes, we've got tacos, we've got burrata, Italian stuff, we've got pasta. We've just got a new cricket lasagna on the menu today. We've got Middle Eastern.
Taylor and his business partner have been at this since 2018, beginning with a pop-up version of the restaurant. During the pandemic, they sold insect meal kits. Taylor says not only is eating bugs good for the environment, but it's good for your health as well.
Insects are one of the most sustainable proteins on Earth. Our crickets produce 15 times less carbon compared to beef per kilogram of protein, but they also are packed full of nutrition.
I don't know whether I'm ready to try this. What about you? The food supply for rats in New York City is dwindling. Last month, the city required more than 200,000 businesses that sell food to use garbage bins with hard lids. This is what it used to look like in New York City outside of eateries, bags of garbage strewn on the streets. Dr. Stephen Cohen of Columbia University's Earth Institute says the new garbage bins are a start, but there's a long way to go. He says these garbage-lined streets, well, they're just a delight to rodents.
The city's now filled with these plastic bags, and it's basically for the rats, it's like a buffet. They can easily get into them. It's increased the rat populations.
Cohen says it's going to take several years to significantly reduce the number of rats. It's only been a month, but Harlem resident Ron James, well, he says he already notices a difference.
It's a change for me because I come in at night and a lot of times I have to walk in the streets to avoid the rats walking on the sidewalk. So I notice now when I'm walking home, I barely see rats on the streets at night.
By 2026, apartment buildings will also be required to use containers with hard lids. And here's a guy who has a lot of time on his hands, literally. 76-year-old Werner Steckbarth lives in Munich, Germany, and he never has to wonder what time it is. The walls of Steckbarth's apartment are covered with some 366 clocks, one for every day of the year, including leap year, and he's got more in storage down in his basement. He's collected them while traveling the world. The room is filled with the sound of ticking, and once in a while you'll hear the whistle of a cuckoo. When daylight saving time goes into effect, well, he's pretty busy. He spends several weeks adjusting the timepieces. Now, each clock is set to a slightly different time, and that's to avoid them striking in unison at the top of every hour. Steckbarth isn't traveling as much these days, but he still shops for clocks online or locally. And you know, despite his hobby, Steckbarth has a problem with punctuality. Even though he has a watch on each wrist and one around his neck, he still manages to be late. I'll be back in 7 days and on time, but in the meantime, I wish you all peace, joy, and happiness in the ensuing week. Thomas I. Likeness, Eagle News. We live in extraordinary times.
The World Health Organization announces the launch of Sarah. It is a digital health promoter prototype with enhanced empathetic response powered by generative artificial intelligence. This just in time for World Health Day. Joanne Soriano has the details on Health is Wealth.
Sarah is a smart AI resource assistant for health that represents AI-powered health information avatars. It uses new language models and cutting-edge technology. Sarah can engage users 24 hours a day in 8 languages on multiple health topics and on any device. This digital health promoter is trained to give information across major health topics to help people optimize their health and well-being journey.
I'm Sarah, and
These
so
include
nice
healthy habits and mental health.
Human health is my
It is an
specialty.
additional tool for
Now,
people
what
to
we want
understand their rights to health wherever they are.
There is so much
Sarah
to
also has the ability to support people to better understand the risk factors for some of the leading causes of death in the world. These include cancer, heart disease, lung disease, and diabetes. Plus, she can help people access up-to-date information on quitting tobacco, being active, eating a healthy diet, and de-stressing, among other things. WHO Director General Dr. Tedros Adhanom Ghebreyesus says the future of health is digital, and supporting countries to harness the power of digital technologies for health is a priority for the health agency.
AI, of course, holds great promise for improving the delivery of healthcare and medicine and helping countries achieve universal health coverage. AI is already playing a role in diagnosis and clinical care, drug development, disease surveillance, outbreak response, and health systems management. The future of healthcare is digital, and we must do what we can to promote universal access to these innovations and prevent them from becoming another driver for inequity.
Sarah is powered by generative AI and not by a preset algorithm or script. Thus, her responses are more accurate and in real time. WHO says Sarah engages in dynamic, personalized conversations at scale that more accurately mirror human interactions and provide nuanced, empathetic responses to users in a judgment-free environment. In Manhattan, New York, Joanne Soriano, Eagle News. We live in extraordinary times.
Before we'll let you go, here's our photo of the week. This beautiful photo was taken at Hains Point in Washington, D.C. Hains Point is located at the southern tip of East Potomac Park. It offers alternative views of the Potomac River, Anacostia River, and the Washington Channel. Thank you, Matt Ocampo, for this shot. And thank you all for joining us again. If there are stories you want us to share with you, just comment below. Follow us on YouTube, Facebook, and X at Eagle News Live. I am Rose Papa Angeles. We'll live in extraordinary times. Stay happy and healthy, everyone.